Hey everyone, welcome back to Speak Up. I'm Ryan, and today we've got a really helpful topic for you: how to practice English at home. A lot of people struggle with improving their English when they don't have someone to talk to or can't attend classes. But don't worry, because we've got plenty of practical tips to share today that you can start using right away. And, as always, I'm joined by our resident language expert, Nida. How's it going, Nida?
Hey Ryan, I'm doing great. I'm really excited for this topic because there are so many easy and fun ways to practice English at home. Even if you think it's hard to learn by yourself, there are small things you can do every day to make a big difference.
Exactly. So what can listeners expect from today's episode?
Well, we're going to break it all down for you. We'll talk about how to set up a simple daily routine for practicing, how to immerse yourself in English even if you're not in an English-speaking country, and how to practice speaking, even if you're on your own. We'll also cover listening, reading, and writing skills, plus how to make learning fun so it doesn't feel like a chore.
That sounds awesome. So if you're looking for some real practical tips to practice English without needing a class or tutor, stick around. We've got you covered. All right, Nida, let's dive into it. If someone's at home and thinking, I want to improve my English, but I don't have time or I'm not sure where to start, what's the first step? How do they begin practicing without it feeling overwhelming?
The key, Ryan, is to keep it simple. People often think they need to sit down for hours at a time, but honestly, that's not necessary. What matters most is consistency, not the amount of time. If you can dedicate just 15 to 30 minutes a day to English, you'll see steady progress over time. The goal is to make it a regular part of your daily routine, like brushing your teeth or having breakfast.
That sounds pretty manageable. So even if someone has a really busy schedule, they can still fit in those 15 minutes? I mean, everyone can find a little pocket of time in their day, right? It's about making it a habit.
Exactly. And you don't even need to make it a big deal. You can fit it into the little moments of your day. For example, if you're having your morning coffee, you can listen to an English podcast for 10 minutes. Or before bed, you could read a short article or a blog post in English. The point is to just do something every day, no matter how small. And once you get used to it, it won't even feel like a task anymore.
I love that approach. So you're not saying someone has to study textbooks every day for hours, but just fit English practice into their routine, like a small habit.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you. Some people like to do a quick language app session, like Duolingo, during their lunch break or while commuting. The idea is to make it part of your daily life, not something that feels like extra homework. You could even mix things up. Listen to podcasts one day, read something the next, and maybe use an app another day. Variety keeps it interesting and helps different areas of your English skills.
So it's like building a balanced routine that touches on different skills: listening, reading, and even a little speaking, right? And when it's all in small chunks, it doesn't feel as intimidating. I think that's something people can really stick with.
Exactly. And that's the point. The more consistent you are, the faster you'll improve. And the best part is it won't feel like you're forcing yourself to study. You're just naturally incorporating English into your day. Over time, you'll notice you've learned a lot just by doing a bit each day.
So listeners, the takeaway here is, start small, but be consistent. Fit English into your everyday routine, whether it's while you're having breakfast, during a break, or right before bed. The progress will come as long as you stick with it. All right, so we've talked about building a simple daily routine, just finding small pockets of time each day to practice. But what about people who want to take it a step further? What if they want to really surround themselves with English, but they're not living in an English-speaking country?
That's a great point, Ryan. Immersing yourself in English, even when you're not in an English-speaking environment, is super important. It's about creating that environment for yourself. The good news is, you can do this from home pretty easily by surrounding yourself with English in small but powerful ways.
I'm curious. How do you make that happen? I mean, it's one thing to listen to a podcast or read something, but how do you create that immersive environment? Are we talking about watching more English shows, or is it more than that?
It's a combination of things. Yes, watching English shows is a great start, but immersion goes beyond just watching or listening passively. You want to actively engage with the language throughout your day. A really simple tip is to change your phone settings or social media apps to English. Suddenly, all those little interactions, like texting, checking notifications, or even setting reminders, become opportunities to practice.
I've actually done that with my phone. It does make a difference because you're forced to think in English every time you interact with it. What about other ways people can immerse themselves?
There are so many ways. For example, you can make English the main language for entertainment, whether it's music, TV shows, or YouTube channels. But here's the key. Don't just watch with subtitles in your native language. Try using English subtitles or even watch without them once you're comfortable. It forces you to pay closer attention, and you'll start picking up new words and phrases naturally.
Right. So you're saying it's not just about letting the language play in the background, but actually engaging with it. And I guess even small steps like changing your phone to English could help you think in English more often. That's like creating your own little English bubble, right?
Exactly. And don't underestimate how powerful that can be. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more natural it becomes. Another idea is to use sticky notes around your house. Label everyday objects like mirror, fridge, or door with their English names. It sounds simple, but seeing these words daily reinforces your vocabulary without much effort.
That's a clever idea. It's like bringing English into your everyday surroundings. I can see how that constant exposure would help it sink in without you even realizing it.
Exactly. It's all about making English part of your daily life. You can even go a step further and start thinking in English. For example, when you're making a to-do list in your head or planning your day, try doing it in English instead of your native language. It's a small mental shift, but it helps a lot.
So basically, you're building an English-speaking environment right in your home, even if no one around you speaks the language. You've got your phone, your shows, music, and even your thoughts in English.
Exactly. The more you immerse yourself, the faster you'll feel comfortable with the language. It's about taking those small, manageable steps to make English part of your daily life without feeling like you're studying all the time.
I love that approach. It's practical and it feels less like a chore and more like a lifestyle. So listeners, remember, if you want to immerse yourself in English, start by changing the language on your devices, engage with English media, and think in English. Over time, you'll start to notice a big difference. So, Nida, we've covered building a routine and how to immerse yourself in English at home. But I know for a lot of learners, the biggest challenge is speaking. It's tough when there's no one around to practice with. How can someone work on their speaking skills if they're alone at home?
Yeah, speaking is often the hardest part, especially when you don't have someone to talk to. But the good news is, you can still practice speaking on your own. It just takes a little creativity. One of the easiest ways is to start talking to yourself in English. I know it might sound weird, but it's a great way to get comfortable with speaking aloud.
Wait, so you're saying like literally talk to yourself? How does that work?
Exactly. It's simple. Just describe what you're doing throughout the day. For example, if you're making breakfast, you can say, "I'm making eggs, now I'm pouring the coffee." Or if you're planning your day, say it out loud. "First, I'm going to finish this project, then I'll go for a walk." It gets you used to forming sentences and speaking out loud without the pressure of a conversation partner.
That's actually a pretty smart idea. You're practicing speaking, but without needing anyone else there. It's like narrating your life in English.
Exactly. And it helps you get over the fear of making mistakes. Plus, the more you speak, even if it's to yourself, the more natural it feels. You can even take it a step further by recording yourself on your phone. Just talk about your day for a minute or two, then listen back to see how you sound. It's a great way to catch mistakes or hear how you're improving over time.
That makes sense. Kind of like a personal diary, but spoken out loud. And I guess once you hear yourself more often, you start to get more confident. But what if someone wants actual feedback or a real conversation? Is there a way to practice with someone without leaving home?
Definitely. That's where technology comes in. There are so many language exchange apps like HelloTalk or Tandem where you can connect with native speakers or other learners. You can practice by sending voice messages or even doing live video chats. It's a great way to have real conversations without needing to travel or meet in person.
I've heard of those apps. So you can actually have a chat with someone from another country and both help each other out? That sounds like a perfect way to practice speaking.
Exactly. It's like a language exchange. You practice English with them, and they might want to practice your native language in return. It's a win-win. And even if you're shy about speaking live, you can start by sending short voice messages and build your confidence from there.
I love that. It's all about starting small, right? Maybe at first you're just talking to yourself, then recording your voice, and eventually chatting with someone online. It doesn't have to be all at once.
Exactly. It's all about building up your confidence step by step. The key is to get comfortable using English in real situations, even if that means starting with small solo exercises. And remember, it's okay to make mistakes. That's part of the process. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel.
So listeners, even if you're practicing alone, there are plenty of ways to get better at speaking. Start by talking to yourself, recording your voice, and then maybe jump into a language exchange when you're ready. It's all about getting those words out. Okay, so we've talked about speaking and how to practice even if you're on your own. But let's shift to something else a lot of learners struggle with: listening. I know from my own experience that understanding native speakers, especially when they talk fast or use slang, can be pretty tough. How can someone work on their listening skills at home?
Absolutely, Ryan. Listening is a big challenge for many learners. But just like speaking, there are ways to make progress with it, even at home. The key is to make listening an active part of your day. I always tell people, don't just have English playing in the background. You need to actively listen and focus on what's being said.
Right. So it's not just about having an English show on while you're cooking or cleaning, but really paying attention to the words and trying to understand.
Exactly. If you're serious about improving, you have to listen with intention. A good starting point is to choose content that's suited to your level, like podcasts or videos where the speaker talks a bit slower. You can try resources like BBC Learning English or YouTube channels that focus on language learning. Start slow and build up to faster, more natural speech.
That's a great tip. So instead of jumping straight into a fast-paced movie or a complicated podcast, you can ease into it with something more beginner-friendly, right?
Exactly. And when you do listen, try to break it down into smaller pieces. For example, if you're watching a YouTube video, pause after a couple of sentences and repeat what you heard. You can even jot down key phrases or new vocabulary as you go. This not only helps with listening, but it reinforces your speaking and understanding as well.
Yeah, I guess if you repeat what you hear, it kind of trains your ear to pick up on words faster. What about using subtitles? Do you recommend listening with English subtitles on, or should you try without?
Great question. Subtitles can be super helpful when you're first starting out, especially if they're in English. But the goal is to eventually wean yourself off them. Start by watching with subtitles to help you catch everything. Then, as you get more comfortable, challenge yourself to watch without them. It forces you to rely on your listening skills, and you'll start to understand more naturally over time.
That makes sense. So it's like training wheels. You use them at first, but eventually, you've got to let them go to really build those listening muscles.
Exactly. And another useful trick is to listen to the same content more than once. The first time, you might miss some things, but on the second or third listen, you'll pick up more details. You can also try summarizing what you heard in your own words. It's a great way to check if you truly understood the main points.
I love that idea of re-listening. It's not about getting everything perfect the first time, but slowly understanding more each time you listen. So for someone who wants to start improving their listening skills, they should focus on shorter, slower content at first, repeat what they hear, and maybe use subtitles as a stepping stone?
Exactly. And remember to be patient. Listening comprehension takes time, But if you stick with it, you'll start understanding more and more, even when native speakers talk fast. It's all about building that confidence bit by bit.
Awesome advice, Nida. So, listeners, the key takeaway here is to listen with purpose. Find content that fits your level, focus on understanding, and keep challenging yourself by gradually removing those subtitles. Trust the process, and your listening will improve over time. So, we've talked about speaking and listening, but another big part of learning English is reading and writing. Some people think these skills are easier to practice on their own, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just reading a book or writing a few sentences, right?
Exactly, Ryan. Reading and writing can be easier to start with because you don't need anyone else to practice, but it's important to approach them in a way that's practical and consistent. You don't have to dive into long novels or write full essays every day. It's about starting small and building up from there.
That's good to hear. So, where do we begin? What's a simple way for someone to practice reading without it feeling like homework?
The best way to start is by reading something you actually enjoy. It doesn't have to be a textbook or a long article. It could be something as simple as an English blog post, a news article, or even social media content. If you're reading something interesting, it's a lot easier to stay motivated. Plus, you can start with shorter texts and gradually work your way up to more complex material.
So instead of forcing yourself to read something you don't like, pick something that's fun or useful, maybe even a hobby-related blog or an article about something you're passionate about.
Exactly. And while you're reading, don't just skim through. Take a moment to highlight new vocabulary or phrases you don't understand, then look them up. This helps you expand your vocabulary and remember the words better because you're learning them in context. You can even keep a little notebook to jot down these words and practice them later.
That's smart. So it's not just about getting through the text, but really engaging with it. What about writing? I feel like a lot of people are intimidated by writing, especially if they're not confident in their grammar. How can they start without feeling overwhelmed?
You're right, Ryan. Writing can feel intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. Just like with reading, start small. One great way to begin is by keeping a daily journal in English. You don't have to write a lot, just a few sentences about your day, your thoughts, or even what you plan to do tomorrow. The idea is to get comfortable expressing yourself in English without worrying too much about perfection.
So it's more about the habit of writing regularly rather than focusing on writing perfect sentences every time.
Exactly. The goal is to make writing a natural part of your routine. And to help with grammar or spelling, you can use tools like Grammarly, which gives you instant feedback. Over time, you'll start to notice patterns and improve naturally. Another idea is to write short reviews, maybe of a book you read, a movie you watched, or even a product you bought. It's a fun way to practice different types of writing while staying engaged.
I like that. Writing reviews gives you a chance to think critically and explain your opinions in English. And the more you write, the more confident you'll get, right?
Exactly. And just like with listening, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a learning opportunity. If you're writing in a journal or doing something casual like a social media post, don't worry too much about getting everything perfect. The important thing is to keep practicing, and over time, your writing will improve.
So, for those listening, start with short, enjoyable reading and add in some casual writing, whether it's journaling, posting online, or writing a quick review. Don't stress about mistakes, just focus on building the habit. It's all about steady progress.
Exactly, Ryan. And by engaging with both reading and writing regularly, you're not only improving your comprehension, but you're also reinforcing the vocabulary and grammar you're learning. It all connects together.
All right. So we've talked about building routines, immersing yourself, practicing speaking, listening, reading, and writing, all really practical stuff. But here's the thing, Nida. Sometimes learning a language can feel like a chore, right? How do you make it fun so people actually enjoy practicing?
You're so right, Ryan. The biggest mistake people make is thinking learning has to be serious all the time. But honestly, the more fun you make it, the more likely you are to stick with it. One great way to do this is by incorporating English into the things you already love. For example, if you enjoy watching movies or TV shows, why not watch them in English? If you love gaming, play English language video games or try mobile apps that turn language learning into a game.
That's such a good point. So instead of seeing English as study time, you're basically sneaking it into your hobbies. Like, I know people who've learned a ton of English just by watching their favorite Netflix shows or even binge-watching YouTube vloggers.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like work if you're genuinely enjoying it. Watching shows or YouTube channels is great because you hear natural conversations, slang, and everyday language that you might not get from a textbook. Plus, you can even follow topics you're passionate about, whether it's cooking, travel, or sports, so you're learning English in a context that interests you.
Yeah, and I think when you're passionate about something, you're more likely to stay engaged. What about interactive options? I know a lot of people like those language learning apps with gamified elements. Do you think they're effective?
Absolutely. Apps like Duolingo or Memories are fantastic because they turn learning into a game. You earn points, complete levels, and get instant feedback, which keeps you motivated. It's a great way to practice vocabulary and grammar in a fun, low-pressure way. And because it feels like a game, you can easily spend 10 to 15 minutes a day without even realizing it.
That sounds like a win-win. You're learning, but it doesn't feel like a grind. Any other creative ways to make English fun at home?
Definitely. You can also try things like karaoke, sing along to your favorite English songs, and learn the lyrics as you go. Or, if you're into board games or word puzzles, play games like Scrabble or do crossword puzzles in English. These kinds of activities are not only fun, but they also help build your vocabulary and improve your language skills without it feeling like traditional studying.
I love the karaoke idea. It's such a cool way to practice pronunciation and rhythm without feeling like you're practicing. Plus, who doesn't love a good sing-along?
Exactly. And the more enjoyable you make the process, the more consistent you'll be. Learning English doesn't have to be something you dread. It can be something you look forward to every day, whether you're watching your favorite show, singing along to a song, or playing a game.
So, listeners, if you want to take your English practice to the next level, find ways to make it fun. Watch shows, play games, or sing your heart out with some English karaoke. Learning doesn't have to be boring. It can be something you enjoy.
Exactly. The more fun you have with it, the more natural your learning will feel. And when you're having fun, you're much more likely to keep going.
Great advice, Nida. I think that's the perfect way to wrap up today's episode. So to all our listeners, whether you're building a routine, practicing speaking, or just having fun with English, remember to stay consistent and enjoy the process.
Definitely. Learning a language takes time, but if you make it fun and part of your daily life, you'll see improvement without even realizing it.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Speak Up. A big thank you to Nida for sharing some amazing practical tips on how to practice English from home, whether it's building a routine, improving your listening, or making it fun. And to our listeners, if you found this episode helpful, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We'd also love it if you could leave us a review, as it helps more people find the show. We'll be back next time with more tips to help you get better at English. Until then, keep practicing and have fun. See you next time.